highly underrated TV shows that sort of have flown under the radar for most people. And this is a topic that weighs, I don't want to say it weighs heavily on me, but it means a lot to me because, again, I somehow would land on these shows that I would love. And then for some reason, those were the shows that would struggle to stay on the air. First and foremost, I remember it from News Radio back in the 90s.
Oh, God, I loved that show.
Love.
Yeah.
From Phil Hartman to Joe Rogan to Dave Foley to Maura Tierney. The whole cast was just awesome. And even Andy Dick. It's like the one thing I can watch Andy Dick in and not want to throw something at the television because him as Matthew was fucking hilarious.
Can I tell you the one time I met Andy Dick?
Yes.
It was fucking poetic. I was at the Roxy watching Papa Roach, right? I was able to talk. I was at the gym and I fucking got the message, Papa Roach, if you like this band, Papa Roach is playing at the Roxy in 1 hour. And I went, fuck yeah, I'm going to cancel my workout and go and hang out with the boys. So I went in, they're sold out. So I just walked up to the front and I was like, listen, is there any way I can talk to anyone that works on the crew? I know all the guys. And luckily, just blind luck, the woman who was working the desk was like, I know who you are. You're cool. Go ahead. And so I walked in, but I'm in like black pants and a black sort of t-shirt, really plain looking, right? I'm not dressed up for it. So I go in and I'm just standing in the corner or whatever, and I'm next to where the connecting thing of where the seats are for people who want to sit down and have a drink to where the pit is. And I'm just standing there and I'm leaning over and Andy Dick taps me on the shoulder. He's sitting there. And because I'm just standing there, he taps me and he says, "Give me a drink."
Thinking you were the bartender? Like you legitimately worked there?
Thought I was the bartender. Yeah, he thought I was the bartender because I was just wearing a black shirt. He must have thought I was a bartender. And I'm standing there and he taps me on the shoulder. He says, "Get me a drink." And I said, "I'm sorry, man, I don't work here." And he said, "You can still get me a drink." God. And I said, "I'm not getting you a drink." He was like, "Well, I don't like you either." And then he turned back to his friends. That was my moment with Andy Dick.
That's like that right there. If you could ever sum up what meeting Andy Dick is like from what I've heard from other people, that's the definition of what it's like to meet that guy. But that tells you how good. Bummed. That tells you how good news radio was. The fact that I could watch him as Matthew, the battles he would have with Joe Rogan and the guest stars. They had guest stars like Bob Odenkirk, Saul Goodman.
How long did it run?
I think it was 5. I'll double check this. But what really ended it was when Phil Hartman died.
Oh, of course.
They had brought in John Lovitz previously as a guest spot, and then they ended up bringing him back to replace Phil Hartman, and it was not the same. I'm seeing here.
Well, of course, it's not the same. I mean, he was so perfectly dry. Phil Hartman was the best at that fucking dry 1950s cigar smoking Scotch holding.
Oh my God. And I can't even believe I forgot the person who might be the best part of the show is Stephen Root, the guy that played Jimmy James, the owner.
Oh, yeah. There's all of them. See, so many people got their start on that show, and it amazes me. You're absolutely right, because I love that show when it started, and I remember you'd see them pop up in sitcoms for 20 years afterwards, right?
Yep.
You'd see them keep coming up. And I remember when I saw the lady who was Jim Carrey's wife in Liar Liar.
Martini,
I just remember pointing at the screen going like, that's her.
Yep.
Yes. Like every time I'd see her, I'd think it was amazing.
Dude,
they were fantastic.
So we got to mention the other two people that haven't been mentioned yet. We did have Candy Alexander, who played Catherine Duke, and then Vicki Lewis, who played Beth. Just brilliant on all sides. And this was one of those shows that for some reason had a tough time gaining traction. It just could not. I think it bounced around the schedule a lot. They had put it on. So remember in the 90s, Thursday night on NBC was the must-see TV. And then, but it bounced around, and that's what happened to the other shows that I have on this list of mine, which are Community, Scrubs, and Life. I expect people to know Community and Scrubs. Life, not so much. That's the one I've mentioned before with Damian Lewis, but that got hit by the writer's strike. Community, it was the same thing. It just wasn't quite getting the numbers. They shuffled it around the schedule. You weren't quite sure if it was coming back. Same exact thing happened to Scrubs, where all of a sudden it's not on the fall schedule, but it was going to be a mid-season fill-in.
See, that's an interesting thing because that didn't happen in Australia. Scrubs was an overnight sensation. It was a monster from the beginning to the end. It was like it got put on. It might have been because we were more into kind of the quirky comedy or whatever, but it was put on Monday night or a Thursday night viewing, and it was a staple for fucking years and years and years.
Yeah,
like we there was no glitch in that. It was a hit from the very beginning.
Oh, and I love that show. And I said this before, is that like Bill Lawrence, the guy who's behind Scrubs, he's also the guy that's behind Ted Lasso. There's just something, there's a way that he makes shows. It's just brilliantly done. Although I want to go back to News Radio, and I just remember there's one scene that reminds me of my radio days most, because obviously it's News Radio. And first of all,
hold on a second. Do you think that you love News Radio because of the radio aspect?
No.
Is that how much of that plays into it? No,
nothing. No. It's the storylines, it's the actors, it's the way that it was written, it's all of that stuff. It had nothing to do with and it just so happens that I ended up working in radio. But I remember one of the first things was there was a guy I worked with in Florida, and he didn't throw a fit, but he would always be like, "Did you notice they never had the sales staff on that show?" And I was like, that's what you're going to fucking complain about, is that they didn't have the sales staff on the show? Wow. So come to find out, that's in the first episode. I went and bought all the DVDs because you can't find it on streaming anywhere. So I have them all on DVD. And in the first episode, Dave Foley goes to the wrong building. He goes to the WNYX sales building. And they tell him, oh, you want the programming building. So that's why you never see a sales staff in News Radio, because they're in a completely different area.
But do you think they did that so that they wouldn't have to bring sales into the show? Really? You think they actually said that at the beginning and were like, in case anyone's wondering, in case anyone wants to have a fit about why the sales staff isn't in the show, here's the beginning scene where it's like, here's your get out of jail free card of why sales. Do you think that's why they did it, or it just was...
I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming that they probably had that conversation where they were figuring out, okay, so if that show, or, you know, we already have this staff. First of all, did you know Joe Rogan wasn't the original engineer? It was another guy. So when you go watch that first episode, Joe Rogan ain't in it. And I think they knew that they had a big enough staff to try to incorporate a sales aspect would have been too much. They wanted to focus
say,
to be
the
on
other
the
thing
news.
is, who gives a shit about sales? Like, the only people who give a shit about sales are the people that own the radio station. Like, the guy that does sales in the show, who's going to care about him? You care about the on-air talent and the people that people who do sales.
WKRP did it right. They had their sales guys on the show. And that was done properly. And so I'm getting sidetracked here because I got a couple of points here to make. So because this all relates to kind of this radio aspect of things, especially being a production director. There's a scene, actually I think it takes place almost over the whole episode, where they're plugging baseball is on the way. The season of baseball is right around the corner, and so it's Phil Hartman going, the crack of the bat, the roar of the crowd, and it's them in Dave Foley's office producing this 10-second bit, and they just can't get it right. And then all of a sudden, Catherine Duke walks in, and she completely cuts out almost all of Phil Hartman's lines. And it's just a crack of a bat, a roar of the crowd, and you don't hear any, you just hear the sounds. And then it's like, baseball returns to WNYX. And that was it. And I was like, I've sat and I've had to sit with clients. I've had to sit with people who I work with who just want to nitpick every single little fucking thing. And I realized, dude, like the shit that you're changing doesn't fucking matter.
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
None of it matters.
It's not going to fucking matter. If we can cut this down to 15 seconds, we're fine. But the shit that you want to put in here, and that scene resonates so much with me after the radio
but do you think that scene would have driven other people insane, having to watch that and go, this is labor, this is just driving me insane?
No,
do you think that most other people would have gone, these people are fucking crazy?
They did it brilliantly on the show where it's not worn out. They revisit it. Like something happens and then they come back to this scene where they're still working on it. Something happens and then they come back to this scene, and it gets to the point where all of them are sitting in the office and they're just like leaning back, falling asleep. They're just so frustrated because they can't get this thing to sound the way that they want it to. Now, jumping over to the sales aspect of things, it reminds me of an episode of The Office, and it's when the sales staff is catered to completely, and the rest of the staff is just being shit on by the sales staff. They're throwing their papers at their desk. The one girl, Angela, walks over to Phyllis and she's like, I've emailed you 3 times. You can't come over to my desk? And Phyllis's response is, if I haven't had time to respond to your email, I don't have time to come to your desk. And it's like, fuck, that's my life. Because when all this stuff was going on was when I worked as a production director. And I've worked with some good salespeople. I've worked with some bad salespeople. And it's something that bothers me when it comes to this sort of aspect of things, is how when you cater to the salespeople, you wonder why the product suffers. Because the salesperson's there to sell the product. But the way that things have been done in radio is it's now been turned upside down where, well, the salespeople are the ones that make us the money, so the salespeople need to be catered to. No, that's not the case. Everybody needs to be on equal footing. But ultimately, what goes on the air, that's the product. If that sounds like shit, or if what your sales staff is doing makes that sound like shit, then you're not going to be able to sell anything in the future. And it just it meant so much to me to watch this episode where the sales staff just treated everybody else like shit. And I'm like, yeah, like that's my life. Like that's what happens. Like every single day, the sales staff can get away with whatever they want because they're the ones that make the money.
Right. Do you think that the reason the show didn't connect the way that you were saying is just because it kept getting bounced around time slots, or because some of that humor and information was niche?
No, I think for news radio, I don't think any of that was really too niche. I think that it was they dealt with a lot of very broad topics, and I think it was truly that it just bounced around a lot. And it was the same thing with Scrubs here, because Scrubs, another one of those ones, it didn't have they didn't just leave it in a spot. It bounced around, so it became a when can I actually watch this thing? You know?
Yeah. Which really is a shame because you've got people putting their life and blood and sweat into something, and it doesn't. And the only reason it doesn't connect is because of that one thing. That one thing is just people don't know where to find it.
Yeah.
So the one that I have before we move to five fast questions. Have you ever heard of Gallivant?
No.
Jamie Lewis from thebasis.net sent me. I watched this at his house last year. I fell in love with it. It is a musical comedy series, half-hour episodes, based on it's based in medieval times with knights of the round table and princesses and magic spells and stuff. But it has nothing but modern jokes and modern commentary. And it's very niche and very bizarre and funny. And it has a few big actors in it. And the thing that I thought was amazing, you should go and check it out. Everyone should check it out, okay?
Oh, it's got Vinnie Jones.
Exactly. It's got Vinnie Jones as the number one henchman for the king, who later accidentally upgrades to being king. And it's like, how the fuck did that happen? And when you find out, it's kind of bent and backwards. And the queen is an absolute bitch. And she sings songs about just being a bitch. And she's like, I don't give a fuck about anyone. Like so it's really, really funny. But I knew that I'd fallen in love with the show when they got 8 episodes. And then the people who were fans of the show protested the company, which I'm trying to look it up right now. I think it was put on, trying to find it. I don't know what station aired it, but the point is ABC. The fans actually wrote in when they said, we're not going to be giving a second season to this, or we're on the fence. And they said, please pick him up for another season. We love this show. We want it desperately. The opening number for the first episode of season 2 was a 10-minute epic about how they can't believe they got a second season. The whole song is literally saying, I can't believe they picked this up. I can't believe they let us do this shit again. And like the whole song, and it's fucking epic. It's not just a little ditty. It's a whole thing with dancing choirs and pirates swinging from the mains and falling into the ocean and monsters coming out of the sea and CGI. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. And they knew when they got the second season, they said, we're never giving you another season. So just do whatever the fuck you want. Here's your budget. You've got your time slot. You got a few episodes, whatever. And so they took the second season was so much more epic than the first one because they literally knew it's over after this. We can do anything we want. So they had all sorts of weird shit in there. So that was, and I think that is one of the most underrated TV shows. I have yet to meet a single person who likes music, musical theater, or anything TV comedy related. No one's heard of it. I'm like, how have you not fucking heard of this? So check it out. All right, moving on.
I'm definitely going to have to check this out. It was actress Mallory Jansen who was in the show. She described it as the bastard child of Monty Python and the Princess Bride. If that doesn't
that's a
sell
good
you
way
on
to
the
put
show, then it's definitely just not going to be for you.